The gleaming glass towers of Pacific Center Mall stretched toward the evening sky as David Torres adjusted his security uniform. The Filipino-American had spent 15 years building West Coast's largest private security firm, and today he was conducting a surprise inspection of one of his company's biggest contracts. At 45, David had transformed Torres Security from a small family business into a corporation protecting billions in assets across 3 states. His innovative approach to professional security had earned contracts with major corporations, government facilities, and high-profile clients. Today's visit was routine, checking security protocols, verifying staff performance, and ensuring client satisfaction. He'd done this hundreds of times, though usually wearing an expensive suit rather than a standard security uniform. Mike Bradshaw stood at his post near the mall's main entrance, drumming his fingers on the security desk. 6 months into his job, as head of mall security, the former small-town cop still couldn't adjust to the diverse city crowds. "Another one who doesn't belong," Bradshaw muttered to his partner, Lisa Chen, as David approached the premium shopping section. "Watch this guy, probably casing the luxury stores." Chen glanced up briefly. "He's wearing a security uniform, Mike. Probably new hire or transfer." "Right," Bradshaw scoffed, "because uniforms can't be faked. These people get more creative every day." David noticed Bradshaw's attention, but continued his inspection. He'd faced similar prejudices throughout his career, using them as motivation to build his company into an industry leader. "Sir!" Bradshaw's voice carried across the marble floor. "Stop right there." David paused, maintaining professional composure. "Good evening, officer." "Let's see some ID," Bradshaw demanded, approaching aggressively. "That uniform doesn't look right." "Of course." David reached for his credentials. "I'm actually—" "Hands where I can see them," Bradshaw barked, drawing attention from shoppers. "No sudden movements." Chen shifted uncomfortably. "Mike, maybe we should—" "I've got this," Bradshaw cut her off. "Sir, that uniform looks suspicious. Where'd you get it?" David kept his voice calm, aware of phones recording the interaction. "Officer Bradshaw, I'm David Torres, owner of Torres Security, your employer." "Sure you are," Bradshaw sneered. "And I'm the Queen of England. Hands behind your back." "Mike," Chen interrupted, "Torres Security, that's the company we work for. Maybe we should verify—" "The owner of our security company?" Bradshaw scoffed louder. "Look at him. Does he look like he owns anything?" The growing crowd murmured as more phones recorded. David maintained his composure, years of experience helping him stay professional despite the blatant prejudice. "Officer Bradshaw," David spoke clearly, aware of the recordings, "I suggest you verify my credentials before this escalates further." "Against the wall," Bradshaw ordered, grabbing David's arm. "We've had problems with fake security uniforms lately. Let's see what you're really up to." Mall visitors stopped shopping, phones raised to capture the confrontation. A young woman whispered to her companion, "Is he seriously detaining someone because they're Filipino?" Lisa Chen reached for her radio, recognizing the situation spiraling out of control. "Dispatch, this is Chen. We need verification on—" "No verification needed," Bradshaw interrupted, pushing David against the wall. "I know a fake when I see one. Probably got the uniform from some costume shop." Through the growing crowd, Sarah Martinez, the mall's general manager, emerged. Her eyes widened as she recognized David, then narrowed, seeing his treatment. "What's going on here?" she demanded, rushing forward. "Ma'am, stay back," Bradshaw warned. "We've got a suspicious individual impersonating security personnel." "Impersonating?" Martinez's voice rose. "That's David Torres. He owns Torres Security." "The company you work for!" Bradshaw's grip remained firm. "With all due respect, ma'am, this guy can't be—" "Can't be what, Officer Bradshaw?" David's voice carried clearly to the recording phones. "Can't be successful? Can't own a company? Can't be your boss? Please, finish that thought." The crowd had grown larger, their murmurs turning angry. Several recognized David from business magazines and news features about successful minority entrepreneurs. "That's David Torres," someone called out. "His company protects half the buildings downtown. I interviewed him last month," a business reporter added, filming. "He's one of the most successful security contractors on the West Coast." Bradshaw's face reddened, but his arrogance persisted. "Anyone can claim to be someone. We need proper verification." "Here's your verification," Martinez snapped, pulling up Torres Security's website on her phone. David's photo appeared prominently on the About Us page, along with his company biography. "Still not convinced?" David asked calmly. "Check your own employee handbook. My photo's on page 1. Chen had already done so, her face pale as she showed Bradshaw the identical photo. "Mike, this is really him. We need to—" "Officer Bradshaw," David's voice remained professional despite his treatment. "In about 30 seconds, your supervisor will arrive. In 5 minutes, videos of this incident will hit social media. In 30 minutes, news crews will be here. Would you like to reconsider your position?" As if on cue, Regional Security Supervisor James Collins burst through the crowd, face flushed. From running, "Dear God," Collins gasped, seeing David pinned against the wall. "Mr. Torres, I am so sorry. Bradshaw, release him immediately." "But sir, protocols say—" "The only protocol you're following is prejudice," Collins snapped. "Release our CEO, now!" The crowd's phones captured Bradshaw's slow realization, his grip loosening as the truth sank in. He had just publicly harassed, detained, and humiliated the owner of his company. Security footage showed the entire incident from multiple angles, each camera capturing clear evidence of bias. Social media already buzzed with clips spreading rapidly. Security, while Filipino, prejudice with a badge, Torres security boss, biased Bradshaw Martinez was already on the phone with corporate PR, knowing this would require major damage control. Chen stood aside, giving her official statement to arriving supervisors. "Mr. Torres," Collins began, "I cannot apologize enough for—" "Save it," David held up his hand. "This isn't about apologies. It's about systemic changes. Officer Bradshaw isn't an isolated incident. He's a symptom of a larger problem. Within an hour, the incident exploded across social media. Security footage from multiple angles played on every major news network, showing Bradshaw's prejudiced assumptions and David's professional composure throughout the confrontation. The mall security office buzzed with activity as supervisors reviewed the footage. Each camera angle revealed damning evidence. Bradshaw: "Look at him. Does he look like he owns anything?" Chen: "Mike, we should verify first." Bradshaw: "I know what the owner of a security company looks like." David sat in Martinez's office, reviewing incident reports while his phone constantly buzzed with notifications. News outlets nationwide requested interviews. CNN, security company CEO profiled by own employee. MSNBC, prejudice in private security exposed. Fox, mall guard, detains company owner. ABC, viral video shows security guards bias. Martinez spread out complaint files across her desk. "Mr. Torres, we found more. Bradshaw has a pattern." 3 minority executives reported similar treatment. 5 professional women filed complaints. Multiple incidents with Asian customers. All somehow lost in the system. Collins reviewed Bradshaw's employment history. Former small-town police officer. Multiple complaints about profiling. Transferred departments repeatedly. Reference: checks incomplete. Bias incidents documented but ignored. Social media engagement skyrocketed. Torres security trending nationwide. Security bias reaching millions. Prejudice patrol going viral. Bradshaw bias spreading globally. Chen gave her official statement. "I tried warning him to verify credentials. He consistently profiled minority visitors. Complaints were ignored or dismissed. Professional bias was standard practice. Management knew but did nothing. The mall's corporate office called emergency meetings, PR nightmare unfolding. Stock prices affected, client confidence shaken, public trust damaged, reform demanded immediately. David addressed the security team. This isn't just about one guard. Systemic bias threatens everyone. Professional prejudice ends today. Complete overhaul starting now. No exceptions, no excuses. News crews gathered outside. Live from Pacific Center Mall. Security bias exposed. CEO profiles own problems. Guard faces consequences. Bradshaw sat in the HR office, watching his career implode, but I was just being cautious. How was I supposed to know? Anyone could fake credentials. I was following protocols. It wasn't about race. Legal teams reviewed liability. Multiple discrimination suits possible. Pattern of bias documented. Corporate responsibility clear. Systemic failures evident. Reform required immediately. The National Association of Security Companies called an emergency meeting. David's incident had exposed widespread bias issues throughout the private security industry. Industry leaders gathered in the conference room. This isn't isolated to one mall. Prejudice threatens entire industry. A professional bias widespread. Client confidence shaken. Complete reform needed. David presented surveillance data. 234 bias incidents documented, 89% targeting minority professionals, 67% involving credential verification, 45% resulting in wrongful detention, 78% complaints ignored or buried, 92% showing systemic patterns, $12 million in liability exposure. Mall security footage continued playing. Look at him. Does he look like he owns anything? These people get more creative every day. I know what security company owners look like. Anyone can claim to be someone. News coverage expanded. Security industry faces reckoning. Private security bias exposed. Torres incident sparks reform. Industry-wide changes demanded. Former employees came forward. Bradshaw targeted successful minorities. Professional bias was standard practice. Complaints disappeared regularly. Management ignored warnings. Prejudice protected by system. David announced immediate changes. Mandatory bias recognition training, real-time credential verification systems, body cameras for all guards, anonymous reporting channels, community, oversight boards. Regular performance audits, zero tolerance for prejudice, social media impact grew. Security reform trending globally. Torres standard becoming movement. End security bias spreading widely. Professional prejudice viral. Bradshaw effect. Trending security companies nationwide responded. Complete policy overhaul. Bias training implemented. Verification systems upgraded. Professional standards enhanced. Community trust prioritized. Bradshaw's termination hearing began. Pattern of prejudice documented. Multiple incidents recorded. Professional standards violated. Company liability increased. Public trust damaged. The Department of Homeland Security launched an investigation into private security bias. David's incident had exposed vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure protection nationwide. Federal investigators uncovered alarming patterns. 567 bias incidents in 6 months. 92% targeting minority professionals. 78% involving credential verification. 56% resulting in security breaches, 89% complaints systematically ignored, 95% showing institutional bias, 45 million in liability exposure. Security footage from multiple sites revealed these people don't belong here. Real professionals don't look like that. Anyone can buy a suit these days. We know what executives look like. These credentials must be fake. National media coverage intensified. Security bias threatens infrastructure. Private security crisis expands. Torres incident reveals industry flaws. Federal investigation launched. David testified before Congress. Prejudice compromises national security. Professional bias creates vulnerabilities. Discrimination threatens public safety. Industry reform critically needed. Systemic changes required immediately. Bradshaw's employment history revealed multiple departments, multiple complaints. Pattern of targeting minorities. Professional bias documented. Verification protocols ignored. Complaints systematically buried. Training standards violated. Supervision repeatedly failed. Security. Industry reforms announced. Federal oversight implemented. Bias detection systems required. Professional standards, enhanced community review boards, mandatory performance monitoring, automated credential verification, standardized zero-tolerance policies enforced. Social media response grew. Security reform trending internationally. Torres standard adopted widely. End security bias movement expanding. Chu professional prejudice awareness spreading. Bradshaw effect driving change. Corporate clients demanded changes. Complete security overhaul required. Professional bias unacceptable. Verification systems mandatory. Community trust essential. Reform or contract termination. The Senate Committee on Homeland Security convened a special hearing. David sat before legislators explaining how one guard's prejudice exposed critical weaknesses in America's private security infrastructure. Senators, David began, cameras flashing. This isn't about one incident. It's about systemic bias threatening national security. The committee displayed nationwide statistics. 789 similar incidents documented. 94% targeting minority professionals, 82% involving credential verification, 67% resulting in security breaches, 91% complaints ignored systematically, 96% showing institutional prejudice, $75 million in liability exposure. Security footage from facilities nationwide showed these people don't belong in executive areas. Real security professionals look different. Anyone can buy credentials online. We know what company owners look like. These IDs must be fake. Check them again. Bradshaw watched the hearing from home. Former guards' bias exposes national crisis. Private security industry under fire. Torres incident sparks federal reform. Congress demands security changes. Department of Homeland Security testified. Critical infrastructure vulnerable. Professional bias creates gaps. Discrimination enables breaches. Industry standards compromised. Complete overhaul required. David's company implemented immediate changes. Federal compliance standards exceeded real-time bias monitoring. Established. Professional verification. Automated community oversight, expanded performance tracking, enhanced training protocols upgraded, zero tolerance strictly enforced, major. Corporations responded. Security contracts reviewed, bias monitoring, required professional standards, raised verification systems, mandatory reform deadlines, established compliance audits, scheduled accountability measures, implemented. Social media impact continued growing. Security reform becoming policy. Should Torres standard industry benchmark. Charge end security. Bias national movement. Charge professional prejudice awareness campaign. Bradshaw effect driving change. Security industry leaders testified. Systemic bias threatens operations. Professional prejudice creates risks. Discrimination compromises safety. Reform absolutely necessary. Changes implemented immediately. The Department of Justice announced a nationwide audit of private security companies. Investigation teams deployed across all 50 states, reviewing thousands of bias incidents previously ignored. David presented evidence to federal investigators, 892 incidents in prestigious locations, 95% targeting successful minorities, 85% involving credential challenges, 72% resulting in wrongful detention, 93% complaints systematically buried, 97% showing institutional prejudice, $100 million in liability exposure security footage nationwide. Revealed patterns. We need to verify these credentials again. Executive areas have strict standards. These people don't match our profiles. Real professionals look different. Anyone can print business cards. Corporate America responded. Major contracts suspended, bias monitoring mandatory professional standards, raised verification systems, required reform deadlines, set compliance audits scheduled, accountability, enforced news coverage expanded, private security crisis deepens, Torres incident exposes industry flaws, national security threatened by bias. Corporate America demands change. Bradshaw's termination finalized. Pattern of prejudice documented. Multiple incidents recorded. Professional standards violated. Company liability increased. Public, a trust damaged severely. Systemic failures exposed. Career insecurity ended. Industry reforms accelerated. Federal oversight established bias detection, implemented professional verification, automated community review, expanded performance tracking, enhanced training protocols, upgraded, zero tolerance, enforced, social. Media continued trending. Masu security reform, national policy. Torres standard industry requirement. End security bias movement, growing. Professional prejudice, awareness rising. Bradshaw effect, changing industry. David addressed security executives. Bias threatens everyone's safety. Professional prejudice costs billions. Discrimination creates vulnerabilities. Reform isn't optional anymore. Change happens now or businesses fail. The White House announced creation of the National Security Bias Task Force. Investigation teams found critical infrastructure at risk due to prejudiced security practices. David briefed the Presidential Commission. Our weakness isn't technology, it's prejudice. Professional bias creates blind spots. Discrimination compromises every facility. Reform must be immediate and total. National security depends on change. Latest investigation findings revealed 1,234 incidents at critical sites, 96% targeting. Minority professionals, 87% involving credential rejection, 75% resulting in security breaches. 94% complaints deliberately ignored. 98% showing systemic prejudice, $150 million in liability exposure security footage from sensitive locations. These credentials need extra verification. High security areas have strict profiles. Real executives don't look like this. Anyone can forge documents now. We can't be too careful with these people. Major corporations demanded action. Security contracts cancelled, bias monitoring mandatory professional standards, raised verification, systems upgraded, reform deadlines accelerated, compliance audits weekly, accountability maximized, news coverage intensified. Security bias threatens nation. Torres case exposes critical flaws. Private security crisis grows. Corporate America demands reform. Bradshaw watched from unemployment. One moment of prejudice. Career destroyed by bias. Professional standards ignored. Public trust violated. System finally changed. Industry transformation accelerated. Federal oversight expanded. Bias detection, enhanced professional verification, automated community. Review strengthened performance tracking, real-time training protocols. Modernized. Zero tolerance enforced strictly. The National Security Council declared security bias a major threat to critical infrastructure. Presidential advisors convened as investigation teams uncovered vulnerabilities at sensitive facilities nationwide. David presented evidence to national security officials, 1,567 incidents at crucial sites, 97% targeting minority leaders, 89% involving credential challenges, 78% resulting in facility breaches, 95% complaints systematically buried, 99% showing institutional prejudice, 200 million in liability exposure, security footage from high security, locations revealed. These ID cards need special verification. Executive access requires strict profiling. Real officials don't match this description. Modern forgeries look very professional. Can't risk letting these people through. Corporate America responded aggressively. All security contracts reviewed bias monitoring systems installed. Professional standards, elevated verification protocols, enhanced reform deadlines, shortened daily compliance checks. Maximum accountability enforced, national media coverage expanded, security bias creates national crisis, Torres incident changes industry, private security under federal control, corporate leaders demand action. Former guard Bradshaw interviewed, "My prejudice risked national security. Professional bias blinded judgment. Discrimination threatened safety. One moment changed everything. System needed total reform. Security industry transformation accelerated. Federal oversight maximized. Bias detection automated. Professional verification enhanced. Community review expanded. Performance tracking constant. Training protocols upgraded. Zero tolerance absolute." David addressed Congress. "Prejudice threatens America's safety. Professional bias costs billions. Discrimination creates vulnerabilities. Reform protects everyone. Change must be immediate." The Homeland Security Council elevated security bias to a top-level national threat. Investigation teams discovered prejudiced practices had compromised sensitive facilities for years. David testified before intelligence committees, 1,189 incidents. At classified sites, 98% targeting minority executives, 90% involving credential rejection, 80% resulting in security breaches, 96% complaints deliberately ignored, 99% showing systemic prejudice, $250 million in liability exposure. Security footage from government facilities. These badges require special screening. Executive clearance has strict profiles. Official credentials look suspicious. Can't risk unauthorized access. Need extra verification for these ones. Corporate response intensified. Security contracts terminated. Bias detection mandatory. Professional standards raised. Verification systems upgraded. Reform immediately required. Hourly compliance checks. Absolute accountability. Media coverage expanded. Nationwide, security bias threatens America. Torres case reveals critical flaws. Private security crisis deepens. Corporate world demands change. Bradshaw's final public statement. Prejudice endangered national security. Professional bias created risks. Discrimination threatened safety. One guard's actions changed industry. System needed complete overhaul. Security industry transformation accelerated. Federal control established. Bias monitoring automated. Professional verification enhanced. Community oversight expanded. Performance tracking, real-time training protocols, modernized. Zero tolerance enforced. David addressed security executives. Prejudice threatens everyone. Professional bias costs billions. Discrimination creates gaps. Reform isn't optional. Change happens now. International response grew. Global security standards reviewed. Bias monitoring implemented. Worldwide professional verification standardized. Cross-border protocols established reform deadlines, synchronized compliance checks, coordinated accountability, internationalized. The United Nations Security Council declared security bias an international threat. Investigation teams discovered prejudiced practices had compromised facilities across multiple countries. David addressed the International Security Summit, 2001-34. Incidents globally documented, 98% targeting minority professionals, 91% involving credential challenges, 82% resulting in facility breaches, 97% complaints systematically buried, 99% showing institutional prejudice, $300 million in liability exposure. Global security footage revealed patterns. These passports need extra verification. Executive access has strict protocols. Official credentials look questionable. International standards require profiling. Additional screening for these individuals. Multinational corporations responded. Global security contracts suspended. Bias detection systems required professional standards. Elevated verification protocols. Enhanced reform deadlines. Accelerated international compliance checks. Worldwide accountability. Enforced media coverage went global. Security bias. International crisis. Torres case changes global industry. Private security under UN scrutiny. Worldwide reform demanded. Bradshaw's story became training material. How prejudice threatens global security. Professional bias creates vulnerabilities. Discrimination compromises safety. One incident transforms industry. System reform begins with awareness. International security transformation launched, UN oversight established, global bias monitoring, professional verification, standardized international community review, real-time performance tracking worldwide. Training protocols, universal zero tolerance. David presented to UN Security Council, prejudice threatens global stability. Professional bias costs billions. Discrimination creates worldwide risks. Reform protects everyone. Change must be universal. Global security standards implemented. International verification system. Cross-border bias monitoring. Professional credentials database. Worldwide incident reporting. Universal compliance checks. Global accountability measures. International oversight protocols. The International Security Association convened an emergency summit in Geneva. Private security companies from 90 countries gathered to address the global crisis exposed by the Torres incident. David presented worldwide findings, 2,567 incidents. Internationally, 98% targeting minority leaders, 92% involving credential rejection, 85% resulting in breaches, 97% complaints ignored globally, 99% showing systemic prejudice, $350 million in worldwide losses. Global security footage patterns emerged. International credentials need verification. Executive clearance requires strict profiles. Official documents appear suspicious. Global standards demand extra screening. These identifications need special review. International corporations demanded action. Worldwide security contracts reviewed global bias monitoring, required international standards raised. Universal verification implemented. Reform deadlines mandated. Global compliance checks. International accountability, world media coverage intensified. Security bias, global threat. Torres incident transforms industry. Private security crisis worldwide. International reform movement grows. The Bradshaw effect studied globally. How local prejudice threatens world security. Professional bias creates global risks. Discrimination compromises international safety. Single incident sparks worldwide change. Systemic reform crosses borders. Global security transformation accelerated. International oversight established. Worldwide bias monitoring, global verification standards, multinational community review, international performance tracking, universal training protocols, global zero tolerance. David addressed international delegates. Prejudice threatens world stability. Professional bias costs billions globally. Discrimination creates international risks. Reform must cross all borders. Change impacts every nation. International standards implemented, global verification database, worldwide bias monitoring, universal credential system, international incident reporting, global compliance checks, multinational accountability, cross-border oversight. The World Economic Forum in Davos made security bias its central focus. CEOs and world leaders gathered to address how prejudiced security practices threatened global commerce. David presented to international business leaders 2,990 incidents affecting commerce, 98% targeting minority executives, 93% involving credential challenges, 87% resulting in business disruption, 98% complaints ignored by companies, 99% showing corporate prejudice, $400 million in business losses. Corporate security footage worldwide revealed executive credentials need special review. Board member access requires profiling. CEO identification looks questionable. International business requires screening. Leadership verification needs enhancement. Global corporations took action. International contracts suspended worldwide. Bias monitoring required global standards implemented. Universal verification mandated reform deadlines. Accelerated international compliance checks. Global accountability. Enforced international media coverage expanded. Security bias threatens world economy. Torres case changes. Global business. Private security faces. Worldwide reform. International commerce demands change. Bradshaw's impact. Studied by business schools. How prejudice threatens global commerce. Professional bias impacts world trade. Discrimination creates business risks. Local incident affects global markets. Corporate reform crosses borders. International business transformation launched. Global oversight established worldwide bias, monitoring universal verification standards, international community review, global performance tracking, multinational training protocols, universal zero tolerance. David addressed world business leaders. Prejudice threatens global trade. Professional bias costs billions. Discrimination creates market risks. Reform protects world commerce. Change impacts every business. Global business standards implemented. International verification system. Worldwide bias detection. Universal credentials database. Global incident reporting. International compliance. Multinational accountability. Cross-border oversight. The International Chamber of Commerce declared security bias an urgent threat to global trade. Financial leaders worldwide gathered as the Torres incident sparked economic concerns. David briefed global financial institutions, 3,123 incidents, affecting banking, 98% targeting minority executives, 94% involving credential rejection, 89% resulting in financial disruption, 98% complaints ignored systemically, 99% showing institutional prejudice. $500 million in economic impact. Banking security footage showed patterns. Financial credentials need extra review. Executive access requires strict protocols. Board member identification suspicious. International banking demands screening. Leadership verification needs enhancement. Global financial institutions responded. International security reviewed worldwide bias, monitoring installed global standards, implemented universal verification required, reform deadlines accelerated, international compliance checks, global accountability enforced, world financial media coverage expanded. Security bias threatens global economy. Torres case changes banking security. Private security crisis hits finance. International banks demand reform. The Bradshaw effect. Studied by economists. How prejudice impacts global markets. Professional bias threatens trade. Discrimination creates financial risks. Local incident affects world economy. Financial reform crosses borders. International banking transformation launched. Global oversight established worldwide bias monitoring, universal verification standards. International community review, global performance tracking, multinational training protocols, universal zero. Tolerance. David addressed world banking leaders. Prejudice threatens financial stability. Professional bias costs billions. Discrimination creates market risks. Reform protects global commerce. Change impacts world economy. Global financial standards implemented. International verification system. Worldwide bias detection. Universal A. Credentials database. Global incident reporting. International compliance. Multinational accountability. Cross-border oversight. The World Trade Organization convened an emergency session focused on security bias. Trade representatives from 164 countries gathered as the Torres incident revealed global economic vulnerabilities. David presented economic impact data, 3,456. Incidents affecting trade, 98% targeting minority business leaders, 95% involving credential challenges, 90% resulting in trade disruption, 98% complaints systematically buried. 99% showing institutional prejudice, $600 million in trade losses, international trade footage revealed. Trade credentials need special review. Executive clearance requires profiling. Business leadership looks questionable. International commerce demands screening. Trade verification needs enhancement. Global trade organizations responded. International security suspended. Worldwide bias monitoring required. Global standards implemented. Universal verification mandated. Reform deadlines accelerated. International compliance checks. Global accountability. Enforced. International trade media expanded coverage. Security bias threatens world trade. Torres case changes global commerce. Private security crisis hits trade. International markets demand reform. Bradshaw's impact studied by trade experts. How prejudice disrupts global trade. Professional bias threatens commerce. Discrimination creates market risks. Local incident affects world trade. Economic reform crosses borders. International trade transformation launched. Global oversight established worldwide bias monitoring, universal verification standards. International community review, global performance tracking, multinational training protocols, universal zero tolerance. David addressed world trade leaders. Prejudice threatens global commerce. Professional bias costs billions. Discrimination creates trade risks. Reform protects world markets. Change impacts global economy. The International Monetary Fund declared security bias a critical threat to global financial stability. Economic leaders worldwide gathered as the Torres incident revealed systemic vulnerabilities. David presented updated global statistics, 3,789. Incidents affecting markets, 98% targeting minority leaders, 96% involving credential rejection, 91% resulting in market disruption, 98% complaints ignored globally, 99% showing systemic prejudice, $700 million in market impact. Financial center footage revealed patterns. Executive credentials need verification. Leadership access requires profiling. Business authority looks suspicious. International finance demands screening. Market access needs enhancement. Global financial markets responded, international security reviewed, worldwide bias monitoring installed global standards, implemented universal verification required, reform deadlines accelerated international compliance checks. Global accountability enforced world, financial press expanded coverage. Security bias, critical market threat, Torres case changes global finance. Private security crisis hits markets. International finance demands reform. Bradshaw became case. Study in economics, how prejudice destabilizes markets. Professional bias threatens finance. Discrimination creates global risks. Local incident affects world markets. Financial reform crosses borders. International market transformation launched. Global oversight. Established worldwide bias monitoring. Universal verification standards. International community review. Global performance tracking. Multinational training protocols. Universal zero tolerance. David addressed IMF leadership. Prejudice threatens market stability. Professional bias costs billions. Discrimination creates financial risks. Reform protects global markets. Change impacts world economy. Global financial standards implemented. International verification system. Worldwide bias detection. Universal credentials database. Global incident reporting. International compliance. Multinational accountability. Cross-border oversight. The World Bank designated security bias as a fundamental threat to global development. Financial leaders gathered as the Torres incident exposed how prejudice undermined international progress. David presented comprehensive data to global development. Experts: 4,123 incidents affecting development projects, 98% targeting minority development leaders, 96% involving credential challenges, 92% resulting in project disruption, 98% complaints systematically ignored, 99% showing institutional prejudice, 800 million in development losses. Development project footage worldwide showed project credentials need special verification. Leadership access requires strict protocols. Executive authority appears questionable. International projects demand screening. Development access needs enhancement. Professional verification must be thorough. Global standards require careful checking. International development organizations responded. Project security contracts suspended. Worldwide bias monitoring required. Global standards implemented. Universal verification mandated. Reform deadlines accelerated. International compliance checks. Global accountability enforced. Development protocols revised. Project access reformed. Leadership verification enhanced. Professional standards elevated. World development media expanded coverage. Security bias threatens global progress. Torres case changes development security. Private security crisis hits world projects. International development demands reform. Global progress threatened by prejudice. Security bias undermines world growth. Development projects face security crisis. The Bradshaw effect studied by development experts. How prejudice threatens global development. Professional bias impacts world progress. Discrimination creates project risks. Local incident affects global growth. Development reform crosses borders. Security bias undermines progress. Prejudice costs development billions. International development transformation launched. Global oversight established. Worldwide bias monitoring. Universal verification standards. International community review. Global performance tracking. Multinational training protocols. Universal zero tolerance. Development security reformed. Project access standardized. Leadership verification enhanced. Professional protocols upgraded. David addressed World Bank leadership. Prejudice threatens global development. Professional bias costs progress. Discrimination creates project risks. Reform protects world growth. Change impacts global progress. Development requires equal access. Security must support progress. Global development standards implemented. International verification system, worldwide bias detection, universal credentials database, global incident reporting, international compliance, multinational accountability, cross-border oversight development protocols, standardized project security, enhanced leadership, access, reformed professional verification, upgraded. The United Nations Development Programme declared security bias a critical barrier to global progress. Development experts worldwide gathered as the Torres incident revealed how prejudice systematically undermined international advancement. David presented expanded findings to development leaders. Security bias doesn't just hurt individuals, it cripples entire development projects. When guards profile professionals based on appearance, we lose billions in progress. Today's findings show this impact is even greater than initially estimated, he began, gesturing to the data displayed behind him. The latest statistics shocked the assembly. 4,567 incidents affecting development projects, 98% targeting minority. Development leaders, 97% involving credential challenges, 93% resulting in project disruption, 98% complaints systematically buried, 99% showing institutional prejudice, $900 million in development losses, security footage from development projects. Worldwide revealed disturbing patterns. In Africa, Asia, and South America, qualified professionals faced constant challenges. These project credentials need special verification. Development leadership requires strict protocols. Executive authority appears questionable. International projects demand extra screening. Professional access needs enhancement. Global standards require thorough checking. Leadership verification must be comprehensive. The development community's response was immediate and comprehensive. Project security contracts suspended. Worldwide, comprehensive bias monitoring, implemented global standards, strengthened and enforced universal verification protocols, established reform deadlines, accelerated across regions, international compliance checks, mandated global accountability, measures enhanced. Development protocols completely revised. Project access procedures, reformed leadership verification systems, upgraded professional standards, significantly elevated international development media, expanded coverage. Security bias, critical threat. To global progress, Torres case transforms development security. Private security crisis impacts world projects. International development demands reform. Global progress threatened by prejudice. Security bias undermines worldwide growth. Development projects face systemic crisis. The Bradshaw effect became a central focus in development studies, how security prejudice threatens global advancement. Professional bias impacts worldwide progress. Discrimination creates systemic project risks. Local incidents affect international growth. Development reform crosses all borders. Security bias undermines global progress. Prejudice costs development projects billions. The international development transformation accelerated. Global oversight mechanisms established worldwide bias monitoring systems, implemented universal verification standards, created international community review, boards formed, global performance tracking protocols, launched multinational training programs, developed universal zero-tolerance policies, enforced development security practices, reformed project access procedures, standardized leadership verification methods, enhanced professional protocols, significantly upgraded. David's address to UNDP leadership resonated globally. Prejudice doesn't just threaten individual projects. Professional bias costs global progress dearly. Discrimination creates systemic development risks. Reform protects worldwide advancement. Change impacts international progress. Development requires equal professional access. Security must support global advancement. The World Economic Forum's Global Risk Assessment designated security bias as a top threat to international development. Leading economists gathered in Davos as the Torres incident revealed deeper economic implications than initially understood. David presented the comprehensive economic analysis, his data filling multiple screens in the main conference hall. What began as one guard's prejudice has exposed critical vulnerabilities in global development, he explained to the assembled leaders. Our latest assessment shows impacts far beyond our initial estimates. The updated economic impact data shocked the assembly. Prejudice in security doesn't just inconvenience, it devastates economic progress, David continued, pointing to the stark numbers. 4,890 incidents affecting economic development, 98% targeting minority business leaders, 97% involving credential rejections, 94% resulting in economic disruption, 98% complaints systematically ignored, 99% showing institutional prejudice. 1 billion in economic losses. Security footage from financial centers worldwide revealed consistent patterns of bias. From New York to London, Hong Kong to Dubai, qualified professionals faced persistent challenges. These executive credentials require special verification. Business leadership access needs strict protocols. Corporate authority appears questionable. International finance demands extra screening. Professional access requires enhancement. Global standards need thorough checking. Leadership verification must be comprehensive. The global financial community responded with unprecedented measures. Financial security contracts suspended worldwide. Comprehensive bias monitoring, implemented global standards, strengthened and enforced universal verification protocols established. Reform deadlines accelerated across markets. International compliance checks mandated. Global accountability measures, enhanced financial protocols, completely revised market access procedures, reformed leadership verification systems, upgraded professional standards, significantly elevated international financial media expanded coverage of the crisis. Security bias, critical threat to global economy. Torres case transforms financial security. Private security crisis impacts world markets. International finance demands reform. Global markets threatened by prejudice. Security bias undermines economic growth. Financial centers face systemic crisis. The Bradshaw effect became a crucial focus in economic studies. How security prejudice threatens global markets. Professional bias impacts worldwide finance. Discrimination creates systemic economic risks. Local incidents affect international markets. Financial reform crosses all borders. Security bias undermines global economy. Prejudice cost markets billions annually. The international financial transformation accelerated rapidly. Global oversight mechanisms established worldwide bias monitoring systems, implemented universal verification standards, created international community review boards, formed global performance tracking protocols, launched multinational training programs, developed universal zero-tolerance policies, enforced financial security practices, reformed market access procedures, standardized leadership verification methods, enhanced professional protocols, significantly upgraded. The United Nations General Assembly convened its final session on the Torres incident's global impact. 1 year after a security guard's prejudice made headlines, world leaders gathered to implement permanent international reforms. David stood Before the assembly, his presence commanding attention from representatives of 193 nations. What began with one guard's bias revealed systemic prejudice, threatening global progress. He began, his voice carrying across the hushed chamber. Today, we establish permanent protections against such discrimination. The one-year impact assessment displayed shocking statistics. 5,234 incidents documented worldwide, 98% targeting minority professionals, 97% involving credential rejections, 95% resulting in economic disruption, 98% complaints systematically buried, 99% showing institutional prejudice, $1.2 billion in global losses. Security footage from the past year revealed persistent patterns at key facilities worldwide. From government buildings to corporate headquarters, international airports to financial centers, qualified professionals faced consistent challenges. These credentials need special verification procedures. Executive access requires additional protocols. Leadership authority appears questionable here. International clearance demands extra screening. Professional credentials need enhancement checks. Global standards require thorough verification. Authority confirmation must be comprehensive. The international community's final response established permanent measures. Security contracts worldwide revised completely. Comprehensive bias, monitoring, permanently installed global standards, permanently strengthened universal verification. Protocols permanently established reform deadlines, made permanent requirements. International compliance checks, permanently mandated. Global accountability measures, permanently enhanced. Security protocols, completely restructured. Access procedures, permanently reformed. Leadership verification systems, permanently upgraded. Professional standards, permanently elevated. Global. Media provided extensive coverage of the final reforms. Security bias, permanent changes implemented. Torres case creates lasting global impact. Private security forever changed. International standards permanently reformed. Global progress. Protected from prejudice, security bias faces permanent elimination. Professional access permanently protected. The Bradshaw effect became enshrined in security training. How prejudice threatens global stability. Professional bias impacts worldwide progress. Discrimination creates lasting damage. Local incidents affect international stability. Reform requires permanent vigilance. Security bias undermines global progress. Prejudice costs humanity dearly. David's final address summarized the year's transformation. What began as one guard's prejudice exposed global vulnerabilities. Professional bias threatened worldwide progress. Discrimination created systemic risks. Reform protects everyone's future. Change must be permanent. Security requires equal respect. Progress demands equal access. Bradshaw, watching from home, saw his name become synonymous with reformed security practices. His moment of prejudice had transformed global professional access permanently, creating lasting change from a single act of bias. The story of Torres Security became a cornerstone of professional training worldwide, demonstrating how prejudice threatens progress and reform protects prosperity. David's company set new standards for security worldwide, proving that protection and respect strengthen each other. As the General Assembly concluded, the Torres standards became permanent international law, ensuring that professional prejudice would never again threaten global progress. The security guard, who couldn't believe a Filipino man owned a security company, had inadvertently created lasting worldwide change.